This is American First Patriot Podcast. I'm your Patriot host, Chauncey Brown. Welcome to the show. Our motto is defending freedom and liberty. Today, we have an exciting podcast lined up for you. America's First Patriot, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, stood up against the establishment within the military, was chastised, was jailed, criticized for standing up for his buddies, other American soldiers, and Americans across the country. This is a real patriot. This is a real hero. This is a person who stands up for what is right, not what is popular. Let me welcome to the show my friend, Lieutenant Colonel, retired Stu Scheller.
Thanks, Chauncey. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be on the show.
Stu, you made national headlines in August of 2021 criticizing the U.S. military on the evacuation of Afghanistan. Can you take us back to that moment in time and unfold and unpack what happened?
Yeah, it's not something that I did lightly. It's something that had been building for a while. So I served in Iraq. I served in Afghanistan. I had a lot of questions about the higher purpose. I believe that wars are won between the theme of politics and senior military leaders. You can win every tactical battle, but if you don't have good strategy, if you don't have generals that can bridge the gap between politicians to achieve political objectives, you consistently lose wars. And this is something that I've been studying. I had a master's in military science. My thesis was on foreign diplomacy. And I had just had a lot of questions. And for me, the Afghanistan evacuation was the punctuation mark on 2 decades of just mistakes. And what bothered me more was that senior leaders never acknowledged mistakes. They consistently deflected blame to the junior service members. They did the same thing after Vietnam when they talked about the drugs in the draft and how they had to raise the standards so that they could revamp the military. But they never went back as general officers and addressed their own failures in achieving the political objectives of Vietnam. There was no generals that were fired for failing to achieve objectives in Vietnam. And it just continued to unfold that way. Whether you look at Beirut, Kosovo, Libya, Syria, all of them are just a long list of failing to achieve objectives. And we just don't fire generals. The only general in my generation that was really fired was McChrystal as a 4-star because he talked bad, but not because he failed to achieve objectives. And so that was kind of my contention. And the Afghanistan evacuation was one of those things where everyone that's a military professional knows that the Taliban hides in the mountains of Pakistan from October to March. And instead, we decided to conduct a withdrawal of military troops from April to September because of an arbitrary September 11th publicity date. Essentially, we decided to draw down military troops while the Taliban was the most active for a publicity stunt. We risked American lives and treasure over that. And I was really disappointed that my generals didn't push back. And then when General McKenzie unilaterally made the decision to pull Bagram off the table, he made the decision because he felt he only had 650 troops and he couldn't hold Kabul or the embassy and Bagram at the same time. But he didn't make that decision immediately in April. He made that decision in the middle of June. And that is stated by the guy that was planning the evacuation, the 1-star, General Farrell Sullivan. He made a comment in the investigation as to how he was planning Bagram through the middle of June. And so Congress wasn't smart enough to ask General McKenzie that question, but he never had to answer for his 2.5 months of indecision. And ultimately what happened then was the planners had to reset the plan and try and plan on an evacuation out of the Kabul airfield. You would have never seen Afghanis hanging off of airplanes, literally through the sky, had we done it from Bagram. Trump's plan in the evacuation/withdrawal of Afghanistan was the last thing we left was Bagram Air Base for all the right reasons, because it was the most strategic piece of terrain. So we leave Bagram. We don't tell our Afghan partners. We leave 7,000 prisoners in the prison. Imagine being a prisoner, getting 3 meals a day, and then all of a sudden your prison guard just doesn't bring you a meal. And then the Taliban walk in unopposed 2 weeks later. They release all the prisoners. All the Taliban with their additional 7,000-man force now walks up to Kabul. A day late and a dollar short, General McKenzie realizes this is falling apart, and he, from 650, tries to ramp up with 5,000 troops, throws them in Kabul. At this point, they're forced to rely on the Taliban for external security. And, you know, obviously the Taliban let the suicide bomber, who probably came from the prison, through the checkpoint, and they killed 13 service members and hundreds of other Americans who were out there. And that was the day that, I mean, I watched all of that unfold real time, that I decided enough is enough. I knew senior military leaders weren't going to hold themselves accountable, and so I made a statement. But, I mean, even after I made my first video, I mean, in response to that attack, then we conducted a drone strike where we killed nothing but 7 children and 3 women. And then after all of that, General McKenzie, the Secretary of Defense, and the President got in front of everyone and told American people what an overwhelming success the Afghanistan evacuation was. General Donahue, one of the 82nd Airborne commanding general, took a picture of himself as the last man leaving Afghanistan. Like, after we had ultimately surrendered to the Taliban, monumental loss, he's taking pictures of himself like he's a war hero because the military's figured out how to weaponize the media. And the whole thing was painfully obvious how bad it was. I mean, there's not a better historical example of military failure. And so I outlined what I thought were those list of failures, and I said, I think the senior leaders need to be held accountable.
You know, as I'm listening to you unpack this whole story, you know, I'm the son of a Navy veteran. I cannot wrap, and I'm also a retired fire captain, so I understand how paramilitary functions. And as I'm listening to you, it sounds like that's not the United States military that you're describing. I mean, I just fundamentally can't wrap my head around that our military, and you've repeated so many from Beirut, but Vietnam, Lebanon, we can go on and on, so many things that we went in but did not have an exit plan. I mean, I don't know. It makes, as a John Q. public, how are we measuring success now? If we're not measuring.
Yeah, the way it should work is when a politician states the objectives for whatever the campaign is, the military general that's in charge of carrying that out should say, we can do that, and then he should be fired if he doesn't accomplish that. Or he tells the president, we can't do that, and the president, if he doubles down and the president says, no, we're going to do that, then the general needs to resign. I mean, that's the only way it should work. Or if he's not going to resign, then he should still be held accountable if he fails. Like, I don't understand why we're not doing that. In any other corporate world, that's how it works. And so we've just allowed these generals to be absolved of responsibility since World War II, and none of them are achieving the political objectives. And they're blaming it on the politicians. They're blaming it on the Department of State. And that was part of General McKenzie's excuse, like, well, the evacuation should have been ordered by the Department of State. Like, those answers aren't good enough anymore. The senior military generals, I mean, the budget of the DOD is like $750 billion a year. The budget of the Department of State is like $30 billion a year. I mean, obviously, the DOD should be running the operations when we're talking about global conflict, like the Afghanistan evacuation. Right. And so I'm just so sick of them ducking responsibility, especially when they preach that as a cornerstone of our military organization.
Exactly. That's how come I can't imagine a breakdown at any level of the military structure of strategies and tactics, because, like you said, it's the cornerstone of who they are. And the politics that you mentioned is very interesting, because you said after World War II. So politics has been really infiltrated a lot more in the past 30 years, or since World War II, or for the last 10 or 20 years or so, where really the military has been politicized and using politics as well, away from the way a military organization is supposed to function. They're doing more of politics than more of military functions, if that's what I understand what's really going on here.
Yeah, so the purpose of the military is war fighting. And right now, they are not achieving what they should be doing. So the base problem with the military is that instead of promoting people based on warfighting capability, which should be the singular purpose of the military, in every branch of service, you're promoted based on an evaluation from your boss, which ultimately is completely subjective. They would like to claim that there's objective metrics that goes into the boss's mental calculation of that, but ultimately the boss looks at his 5 subordinates and ranks them 1 through 5. And so in a perfect world, the boss ranks his subordinates 1 through 5 based on warfighting capability. But we've drifted off of that, and now it's a singular focus on making sure that your boss likes you so that you get the number 1 evaluation. And so what happens when you say the military has been politicized, really in a deeper level, what's happened is everyone's realized they need to please their boss because that's how they get promoted. There's no objective, get in the warfighting simulator, here's the game, here's the challenge, go head-to-head, winner gets promoted. There's none of that. It's strictly based on pleasing your boss. And so a general officer over 40 years gets to his position by pleasing bosses for 40 years and being the number 1 report through essentially not pushing back too hard. Because if you're a pain in the ass and telling your boss what he doesn't want to hear, you're probably not going to be the top report. And so we've developed 4-star generals that don't have the courage to push back. And so when you're looking at like Benghazi and you're wondering why General Ham didn't, he had military options. He saw on TV screens Americans fighting 1v1000, and he did not send in military response forces because he was told to stand down. He gave the same excuse as General McKenzie. I was following the orders that I was given. Like, that is not good enough, General. You have a moral obligation as a military commander to keep the Americans fighting 1v1000 to have some courage and maybe do something about it. And then let the chips fall. Like, if you get fired afterwards, who cares? You're a 4-star general. You're going to still get your retirement, unlike me. But these guys are just such cowards.
It reminds me of a situation when I was a firefighter, and we have to follow orders as well. But there's one order that I didn't follow, and was going into a burning building. I had the line. I was first one in. I had a new guy with me on the backup line, and the captain was standing outside. Well, I will always make an attempt to go in to save the structure or save the children or whoever's in there. Well, anyway, we're deep inside the middle of the house. It's getting hot. I don't see any flames. I don't see anything. Okay, I tell the guy behind me, listen, we got to back out. I don't know what's going on, but I don't feel right. It's too dark. I feel the heat. It's getting hotter, but I don't see any flames. So I was like, we're backing out. Captain says, why are you backing out? Why you disobeyed an order? Right? Come to find out, when I came outside, my captain failed to tell another captain that he had men inside on the front line, and they were pushing from the rear, pushing the fire at us. You got it, like you said, you got to do what's right. And I will disobey an order if it's going to save the person's life that's with me, because now I'm responsible for that new kid. So it's very interesting that that type of environment now exists in the military. Even me taking a test, I have to take a civil service exam for every promotional exam, like you said, based on my skill set, strategies, tactics, how well I perform. And for that to be omitted from the military is extremely troubling to me. Extremely troubling. I mean, I'm really in shock that you laid this out, that it's that way, because I would have never imagined it the way I was raised by a Navy veteran, by me being in the fire department. I'm really shocked. I'm really shocked. Wow.
Yep.
For those that are tuning in, you're listening to let me just do a quick break. For those that are tuning in, you're listening to American First Patriot Podcast. I'm your patron host, Chauncey Brown. We're blessed and honored to have in the studio today veteran Lieutenant Colonel from the Marines, Stuart Scheller, speaking about the challenges not only of the evacuation of Afghanistan, the challenges that the military functions and organization, how it functions, has become challenging. Go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of reform, so a lot of my media coverage has been about accountability, and we've been talking about it. Accountability doesn't solve the systemic problem. It causes a course correction. All of the systemic problems with the military culture, I just wrote a book. It comes out September 9th. You can find it on Amazon or on my website, AuthenticAmericans.com. It's called Crisis of Command. When it comes out, it'll be in all the stores, the Books A Million, the Barnes & Nobles, the Walmart. So I'm really proud of it. But to your questions, Chauncey, I mean, I go through probably like 15 layers of how the culture is just completely misguided in the military and why we're losing wars, and we're not really talking about it. Like, we literally, since World War II, we've lost every conflict in terms of not achieving political objectives. There's a couple academic debates you could have with me about Korea and the stalemate there, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, but I mean, we went back into Iraq 10 years later, and we obviously didn't achieve the political objectives. I mean, almost everything that we've gotten into for the last 60 or 70 years has been a failure. And so when you look at that as a metric, and then you look at how almost zero generals have been fired, I mean, it just makes your head want to explode.
Just by listening to you, it's almost like, if it wasn't for soldiers like yourself, I'm like, wow, is our military really going to protect us? And then we have this yo-yo in the White House now, I don't know. So, go ahead, Stu.
You talking about Milley? Or are you talking about Biden?
No, I was talking about Biden, but I guess it's one and the same.
I didn't know. You got to be more specific.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct. Let's be specific. I don't even want to mention Milley's name at all. But it's really a shame. I'm glad that you're putting a book out and been talking about this issue, bringing it to the nation's awareness. Because I'm even in shock today. I did not know how dynamically the military has changed in the environment. If somebody on the street told me that, I would never believe them.
Yeah.
But coming from a lieutenant colonel, and you've lived it, you've worked in it most of all your life. You know how the environment was when you started and when you left.
Yeah, I think that's why it was so important that I spoke out, because post-Vietnam, everyone has been conditioned to lionize and be kind and grateful and thank the military members. But that course correction might have even swung too far, because, our military leaders need criticism now more than ever, and people really need to take a hard look. And the military has been one of the last, loved organizations. Even the police force is getting just thrown in the gutter. Politics, no one likes them. So, military was literally, one of the last organizations that people could really rally around. But the problem is, if people don't take a hard look at it and criticize it, we just consistently are losing wars right now. And the problems are pretty obvious to me. Like I said, I outline it pretty well in my book. But it's depressing, quite honestly, when you sit back and look at it.
Yeah, it is. And, as I'm listening to you unpack all of these challenges that the military is facing, and I'm thinking about, because I'm really a political animal all my life. I grew up in politics, so, that's kind of like my wheelhouse. But I got a brain fart here for a second. Excuse me, everyone. I'm trying to wrap my head around the future of the military.
Yeah, I think the military. So in my way forward, of my book, I challenged the next president and the next Secretary of Defense. I'm advocating for more competition in the military and more transparency and getting back to a warfighting focus. And I say, in the end of the book, allow me to just pick a team. And I know where all the warfighters are that have been forced out of the military, and give us just a competition. You can build the rules of the competition. And I will pick any infantry unit that has been rated full mission capable by the Defense Report System, and I will go against them, and I will beat them easily, handily. And I will show people how easy it is and how woefully unprepared we are because of the focus that has been lost. And to your point, where the senior military leaders have kind of politicized the organization, Lloyd Austin came out, literally 100 days into his office after Russia at this point was already completely mobilized on the Ukraine border. We're trying to conduct the withdrawal of a 20-year war. We have so many fundamental issues facing the military, some of them that I've already just spoke about. And Lloyd Austin says the biggest threat facing the DOD is COVID. I mean, what a political creature. Like, you are not helping the DOD at all, Lloyd Austin.
Exactly.
Go back to the Raytheon board director member position because you have failed. Like, it was clear to see. And yet we all just listen to him because he's part of the organization and we're all afraid to challenge it and he's the guy. But it's just like, this is black and white, right and wrong. Like, we're crippling ourselves. And so, you you could easily, with the competition, just show how woefully unprepared the military is because of all these other forced requirements on the organization. As the infantry, I've been in the infantry my whole life, 17 years. Like in any given year, I'm spending maybe 5% of my time focused on warfighting. And I'm spending the other 95% of my time doing all this other annual training requirement stuff that is peripheral in nature but absorbs the majority of the time.
Wow. It's a sad state that we're currently in, but the courage that you've taken to write a book or books about the situation, I hope future leaders will adhere to the lessons that you have learned and are trying to teach them. Because if it doesn't get better, you know what the outcome of our military. We're promoting people who are not qualified, who are not capable for strategic and tactic in wartime settings. Like you said, we're going to end up with military chiefs that don't have any balls, that don't know what they're doing. It's going to cow down to whatever the whims of the current administration is, and that's what we do not need. You're right. That's been the only organization for a long time that's been isolated as far as from any type of public scrutiny. Okay, and always held in a high esteem, always. And now, like you said, this general says that the biggest threat to the military is COVID. Are you kidding me? A freaking common cold? You sound like an idiot. It's sad.
I agree.
It's sad. I mean, general. I mean, really, COVID. In 1989, it was listing in the medical journal that it was a common cold. That's all it is. Common cold, COVID. That's another issue. But the sad part, not only about how the military is functioning, what disappoints me, is also how the government fails to respect its veterans when they come home. We should not have one homeless veteran on our streets in this country, but you want to ship $14 billion in a blink of an eye to Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, Chauncey. I mean, we were talking about COVID, and we were talking about taking care of veterans. There's so much information out there, so whether the COVID vaccine is FDA approved or emergency use, whether the military is getting the FDA approved one or some other experimental one, there's so much information. But, let's just say for a second that the vaccine is FDA approved, and let's say the DOD gave a legal order for a independent thinker, for a service member that comes to a conclusion because I'm pregnant, because I've got some underlying medical condition that I don't want to get the vaccination, and I've been at war for 2 decades. I was just talking to a master sergeant from 19 years and doesn't want to get it. For them to give them anything other than an honorable discharge is criminal. And the military right now is not giving any of them honorable. I can't even wrap my brain around that. They talk about taking care of service members. It's just such cowardice through and through.
It's sad. It's sad. It really is. I'm so hurt by what you told me today about our military, because I grew up as a son of a Navy veteran who was proud, who was a patriot. And to hear that the military is promoting individuals based on if their superiors like them is sad, to say the least, because that is not going to help us win war.
No.
And, the courage that you have to stand up because it takes people like you to call them out, because apparently they don't have the balls to do it themselves.
No, I think they've demonstrated that.
Exactly. My hope is, though, that your book will reach millions. I mean, not in 20 or 30 years, but now to have an impact on future leaders that are going to be leaders in 10 years, in 20 years. That's what I hope and pray.
I think it will, Chauncey. The book is pretty powerful. Like, I really think it's going to be well received. Well, it'll also be controversial, but I think it'll be read by a lot of people, and even if they don't agree with it, it's going to plant a seed.
Exactly, because based on what you've shared with us today, they're trying their best within the power, political, military, to keep all this stuff under wraps and to paint this false narrative. Even like you said about the general taking a picture, like we had a success of Afghans withdrawal. That is a slap in the face to every serviceman who passed away in action there and their families. That is horrendous. That they are celebrating when they have blood on their hands. And I'm sorry that I get passionate.
No, but I completely agree with you. Like, even if we hadn't surrendered to the Taliban, even if we hadn't left all that gear, like, if 13 service members had just died the week before, would you take a picture of yourself walking to the airport or walking to the helicopter and say, "Look at me, I'm a badass"? Like, what an asshole.
Exactly. God will not be mocked. Every man shall reap what he sows. And that is so, really, where is the moral fiber in these people?
That's right. Like, there is just no way in my body, if I had just lost 13 people that were preventable, and I'm leaving a week later, that I would allow someone to take a picture of me and then share it all over social media and weaponize it as if we had just succeeded. Like, that is, like, it just fills me with rage.
Absolutely. It's a slap in the face to all of us who are military families, to the people who have died directly. Listen, I do these podcasts a lot. I talk to mostly, candidates and stuff running across the country, but I am really where this country is, especially under Biden. If people don't wake up, I don't know what more you need to see to get involved. Everybody, we need all hands on deck who have a moral character and a moral backbone. We need to stand up and push back against all these false narratives, CRT, racism, white, all this BS that is distracting us from taking care of our children, serving our veterans, our military. We're worried about illegal immigrants. Hey, listen, I pray for Ukrainian people. I pray for the soldiers in Russia. But we got people on the streets here in America. You want to send all that money to a corrupt government that you've been in bed with your whole 48 years in office. Biden, Kerry, Pelosi, all their family members got jobs with Burisma, with energy companies there. It's not about the people. It's about these politicians want to control the money and their power. And that is going to come to an end because God will not be mocked. And I know that our Father will not let these things go unchecked. It's only a matter of time because evil is rearing its ugly head. But we have a lot of fighters out there like Stu, myself, and others who are ready to extinguish that flame of CRT, of racism, of a corrupt military. We all need to stand up. This is the time that we see who the real men and women are. And I'm thankful to be on the front line with you, Stu, fighting this battle because we're going to need all hands on deck because this is a moral battle that we're fighting. These people are morally corrupt in government, in the military, in our educational system, and it's going to take children of God like yourself to stand up and fight back. And I thank you for your courage as an example for all of us to look at. You are a true American patriot, and I'm thankful and blessed to be in your company, to have your friendship, and to be now on the front line of fighting for what is best for America and its people, because the time is at hand. And I hope that it doesn't get worse before it gets better. Stu, I hope I didn't, you still there?
Yeah, man.
Stu, I'm sorry. I went up there to raise. I went up there for a second, Stu.
Yeah. No, I mean, you hit on something that I guess I'll double down on. Like, I'm actually not super religious. I believe in God. I believe in good and evil. But I do think when you do the right thing, when you're honest and you just try to do the right thing, that God rewards that, right? So, Amen. I put myself out there and took a lot of risk, but when you're just telling the truth and you're just being honest, I really believe it works out. And you just gotta, I mean, I don't believe in fate. I believe you gotta kind of shape your own path, but at the same time, I feel strongly that as long as you just keep telling the truth, it's going to work out.
Amen. Stu, you don't know about my story. This is a new podcast. On the Chauncey said they know my story. I'm a God-fearing person because of my past, my testimony, and I'll share it briefly because this is your show and not my show. I've been in prison for 2 years. I've been homeless. I've been in and out of rehab. Those situations really built my character of who I am today. I am humbly blessed that God kept his hands on me for his purpose. And I'm fulfilling his purpose now by what I'm doing, trying to save souls, raise a level of consciousness of good and evil across the nation. Like I did have successes on paper, but my soul was broken. And I led down the path of alcoholism and drugs to try to self-medicate myself. And it didn't end up well. Well, it ended up well now. But, I had to go through some challenges. God was trying to get my attention, and he finally did. And you're right. You are absolutely correct. We receive what we give out. If we do good, good will come back to us. And I believe that we are energy beings, spiritual beings, and if we are good, normally good comes back when you give goodness. So I thank you, for allowing me that moment to share a little bit about my testimony, and that's why I always give him the praise, honor, and the glory, because he saved my life from the depths of hell, and I will always be thankful and blessed for his mercy. Stu, what do you got going on now? I think you formed a PAC or some type of organization.
Yeah, so my website is AuthenticAmericans.com, so that's my brand. Mm-hmm. You can see my political views. I created that just because when I went through everything that I went through, a lot of people had opinions about what I had done and why I had done it. So whether I was a right-wing extremist, whether I was a racist, a fascist, and fill in the name-calling devoid of logical thought. I'm a conservative. I'm a pretty central guy. Everything I did I thought was apolitical. I think holding senior military leaders accountable should be an apolitical issue. There's always going to be one political party in the White House at one time. So like if you call out the failures of generals, you can always be spun as political. And so I created the website, and it has some documents and some messages boards on there, but it also has merchandise and fundraising, and you can buy my book. So it's essentially my one-stop shop for all my stuff. It's got my social media tied to it. And then you brought up the veterans that I'm supporting. So I'm also got a lot of pokers in the fire. I've got a candidate coalition that I'm supporting that are running for this 22 cycle. And so I've got some senators and congressmen and women that are veterans that we've vetted that we think will go up to D.C. and have the courage required to do the things that we need. I believe we need leaders, not politicians. I understand that the people up in D.C. are representatives and not leaders, but I feel like holistically on both sides of the aisle, a lot of people lack courage. So it always comes back to courage and just doing the right thing, kind of what we were talking about earlier. And I mean, when the generals testified before Congress, because Congress gave them a hard time, apolitically, both sides of the aisle, with their sound bites of anger over the Afghanistan evacuation because all the American people were mad. But after that, nothing happened, right? I mean, so I was looking at this, and concurrently, not in the news, was that the Congress, both the Senate and the House, approved one of the largest DOD budgets. And not one of them stood in front of the budget and voted no because they demanded accountability, right? So it was like to stand against the budget would have been to go against self-preservation, could have been spun in anti-military, and there was risk involved in that. And so I looked at it like if you're willing to have a soundbite of anger but then not stand against the budget, you're a coward. You can talk all you want. I don't care about your talk. What I care about is the impact you have, and the only lever of control you have is the budget. And not one of you who acted so frustrated did anything about it. And so I have picked people that I believe have the courage to maybe make some tough decisions, go against self-preservation. And so I got that going on. I also got, I started a veterans town hall where I'm going across the country speaking to veterans, because I think if we mobilize the veteran community across the United States, it would be powerful. The bumper sticker for that ordeal is they can articulate and we will advocate. So I'm also involved in building legislation for veterans. So we are trying to get a bill passed right now that allows veterans to use the GI Bill for starting businesses in addition to going to college. Because I think, a 4-year-old that gets out doesn't necessarily want to spend $200,000 on a liberal college. Maybe they want to start a business. Like, what's more American than starting a business? And so I think that'll get dropped probably when the new Congress comes into session. But I say that only to point out that I've had conversations and I have abilities to write legislation with different people I'm associated with. So getting all the veterans in the room and hearing their problems, I give them an opportunity to maybe go up there and influence some things. But also the other part of it is I feel like veterans a lot of times develop this victimization mentality. So if you go talk to a bunch of old veterans, it's always about the VA. It's always about all the things they didn't get and the social welfare that they should have. The truth is, like, veterans aren't victims, guys. Like, we chose to go. We all have problems. Yes, there are certain things that the government should do to take care of us, but I also kind of want to reinstill, like, let's come together and make a change by being active and not just sitting here stomping our feet and saying, why aren't we getting what we need from the government? Well, let's force the government to do what it should do, because the power actually comes from the people. But in order for that to happen, we have to mobilize as a group. And right now, there doesn't seem to be anyone really doing that.
Yeah, well, I think it's very noble of you. And for all the listeners, if you don't know the website, when you go to Blog Talk Radio, in the description, highlighted under Veteran, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, is his website. So if you forget AuthenticAmericans.com, Authentic Americans.
Yeah, Authentic Americans, you got it.
Yeah, .com. If you go to the Blog Talk Radio, in the description, and it should post out as we process it to Spreaker, that when you go to the description of the show, you should be able to click on Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Schiller's name, and it'll take you to his website. I signed up today. It's a beautiful website. It's extremely informative. I would hope that everyone, when you get a chance, please visit it. Like I said, it's extremely informative, the history of what's been going on with Stu and the things that he's trying to do. And there's also a donate button there. I urge everyone, please. I know it's tough times for everybody, but if everybody can chip in $1 or $5, just a little bit, that would help Stu and the fellows reach their goal to try to help other veterans. And we thank you for your service, Stu, and we thank you for taking the time to come on our show and talk to the American people. And I hope that you'll come back on again. We're going to start going live, doing Zoom within a month or so. But I hope that when you get a chance, I know you're extremely busy, Stu. I know you are. It took me 3 months to get you on my show.
My book comes out September 9, so I'm going to do a new wave of media. So But schedule me somewhere
Okay.
around there, man. I'd love to talk about it.
Awesome. Okay, we'll look for something in August to talk about the book right before it comes out. That sounds awesome, Stu. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you want to say in closing, Stu?
Yeah, I'll just say there's been a lot of people that feel like everything that I did won't make a change, and I just want to point out that I fundamentally disagree with those people. You know, it's easy for people to just kind of continue to live their lives, but you kind of said it earlier, Chauncey, like now is the time where people have to get active. No one cares about what you think. No one cares about all your conversations. The only thing that matters is what you do. It's what action you take. And right now, we need action. The silent majority has allowed these extreme voices to drift our key organizations off course. And it seems like everyone I talk to just like agrees, but at the same time, it's like, well, what are you doing about it? And that's where the conversation kind of stalls. And so I'm out here doing everything I can, and I appreciate everyone listening. But if I could leave you with one thing, it would be, you know, just go to your local political meeting, whether it's Democrat or Republican. Like, I don't even care. Just get active. Like, whatever you believe in, get active with it. Stop talking about it.
Amen. Don't talk about it, be about it. That's Stu Scheller, Lieutenant Colonel from the Marines, saying it straightforward. Thank you, Stu. Really appreciate you coming on, man, and taking time out of your schedule to chew it up with me and talk to the American people, man. God bless you. You know, I wish you the best of luck, and we'll be in touch. And I'll be looking forward to sharing more of your information as well across social media, Stu.
Thanks, Chauncey.
God bless your mom. God bless your mom and dad, too. What troopers they are, man.
Oh,
man, I can't forget them. Your dad, man, he is the best on LinkedIn. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, he's good people.
I got to give Stu Sr. a shout-out, and Momski, too. Love you guys. All right, Stu? Thanks again, Stu, for coming on. Take care. All righty. For those that are tuning in, you're listening to American First Patriot Podcast. We were honored, proud, and blessed to have in the studio veteran Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller talking about standing up against the military chiefs, against the withdrawal in Afghanistan, what a failure it was. We lost so many lives. Our prayers go out to all the service men and women and their families and all of the Afghans who lost their lives as well in this transition, this debacle by the failed Biden administration. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to American First Patriot Podcast. We're here for you, we the people. If you can make a donation, you can cash app us at USA First Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter, USA First Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We're all over the place. We want to thank all of our listeners. Our Twitter supports is over 4,000 in 2 months. Can't thank you guys enough for your support. But like Stu said, everybody, it's time for all of us to stand up. We need all hands on deck if we want to fight back against the left, if we want to fight back against all of this immoral conduct and behavior transpiring within our society and our government. We all must fight back. We're children of God. We serve him. He serves us. Now is our time to thank him for what he has blessed us with by trying to save souls and preserve this nation. We're here every Monday and Wednesday from 7 to 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'm your Patriot host, Chauncey Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at USA First Patriot. Everywhere else, because I've been suspended multiple times on Twitter, it's New York Talk Radio host. That's the original New York Talk Radio host, but I'm proud that I got suspended off of Twitter because now I'm US First Patriot. So they did me a favor. Every lesson is a blessing. So on that note, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. God bless you all. Keep the faith, and we'll talk to you next time on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Have a good night. God bless you all.